Hello, everyone, and welcome to the broadcast. Today, we're going to be continuing our game development project. I actually think we might be able to work fully on the thing that I plan on working on because it is not the next thing to progress the project in the next step as far as completion of the game. It is the thing that we started working on last time and haven't completed yet. And that is positioning logic. The logic that says the shots should come out in a 90-degree cone or something like that. Well, hello there, Spectre. And welcome to the broadcast. We're just getting started, so let's check with the kitties here. We do have Ember across the keyboard. She is the gray one. And then we have Sherbet in the window. Well, not in the window, adjacent to the window. You can see his little tan back in the little house. So let's switch on over here. So, like I mentioned, we're going to be working on the positioning logic today. And I think we need a fundamental rethink on how it's going to work. This, in theory, this should be like a design doc kind of scenario, but, yeah. We'll see how that do. So one of our problems right now is that positioners change the actual initial vector of the projectile. So that can work. I know we have an issue with the sequential ones. Let's see here. That is a long name. Hello there on YouTube tall format. Let me get a translation for you so that I can turn that into something I can say. Okay, we're gonna say soldier. Hello, soldier. Welcome to the game dev stream. So we are working on the positioners. So right now, this is the core function, adjust position. So we go in, we do the local ones adjustment. After saying if we don't have an initial direction, we move it, and we get that target's current movement vector normalized. This isn't necessarily how that entity will move. This is to handle to handle the way movement is calculated, and that's through navigation agents. The fact that this isn't like an actual, this is how it's moving, this is how it wants to move. And we would adjust that. It would be calculated after a teeny tiny movement. Then we prime next positioner's initial direction because we know what it is. This is where I think things start to break down. Because that initial direction... So this initial direction is what we have shifted it to after this. And we tell the next one to run this function. And we'll ask, is everything done? And if everything is done, we wrap that up. This really just needs to be an internal function, right? We assume that it's... Okay, yeah. We assume that it's true. Okay. This is largely a stream of consciousness stream, folks. So if you have questions or anything like that, feel free to ask them. You're not interrupting anything. Well, I mean, technically it's an interruption, but it's an interruption you should feel free to make. So one thought that I had was to make it so that the positioners are independent of the entity coming in. That instead we spawn one and we tell it move a little bit, and then we pass it into the position adjustment with a null transformation happening. We do the position adjustment by passing that transformation down the chain. Then we apply that transformation to it at the end of the chain. So the spawner goes in and says, here you go, apply this translation to yourself. So that would rotate it accordingly. But I think we still run into the problem that all of the targeters and movements have to respect that in their own ways. So I think that's going to be one of our starting points, is adjusting that, because let's go into the spawner. So we create it, we initialize it. This is us copying it so that we don't have to worry about that we get all of the values made identical. But we don't really need to do that. We don't need to have a copy of this guy. Instead, we need to make sure that all... Oh, no. Okay. No, we need to do this copying logic. So if we have an entity to copy, we set it. When we start the spawning process, we clear out that entity to copy. That way, each one of them starts from the same template. All of the random directions of a group that is spawned at the same time will have that same starting point. So if they were facing right, they will all face right as their starting logic there. This is largely irrelevant. It's okay if it were to crash if any of these are missing. So this is pretty much always going to return true unless we've messed up fundamentally. Because with the positioners, we're not... We clear them out, we remake them. We don't need to remake them, because each one is calling the next one pretty much in a linear fashion. If we look at the physics tick, we're asking each of the subsequent ones whether it should function. So if the positioner chain is done spawning, if we look at positioner, done spawning, ask the local one And then it will ask each subsequent one if it should be done spawning. So if we're done, we ask the next one. If we're not done, we don't care about the next one. So we iterate down the chain, and if at any point any of them say, I'm not done, then it's not done. So I think this is another point of simplification, is the concept of a positioner chain doesn't need to exist. We don't need to have the recursion, so we don't need to worry about dealing with that recursion. Or we don't need a pointer chain, so we don't need to worry about dealing with a pointer chain. We would just create new copies off of the existing array. So it removes one extra copy of our positioner objects in the spawner. Then I don't think we use this ever anymore, because spawn points are outside of positioners. So we're really looking down the barrel of a full positioner restructuring here, which is okay. I think that's where we need to be. I think that's where we need to be to make this work. So, some of these are okay, where we need to ask each one of them. So if the first one says, no, don't delay, we ask the next one, should we delay? So as soon as any of them in the chain say they should delay, then we're done asking the chain. So this could again be moved out to the spawner, where we ask, should you delay? We could wrap, and I think we will make sure that we're wrapping all of the spawners' behaviors, the positioners and movers' behaviors in little bubbles like this, so that we don't have to worry about it. But the way of handling them, entities determine how they deal with their movement chain, spawners determine how they deal with their positioners. Same way. So we move the entity, and then we're going to get its target movement out of it. That will be the result of the initial pass of the movement chain. That gets us the first one. That gives us the initial transform. That is effectively this vector floating independently in space. Then we need to take that and we need to apply each position adjustment. Whether that's a rotation, it could be a translation off center too. Things can get pretty weird pretty quick if each successive one is translating as well, because the order of translation and rotation matters with a transform. We could still pass in the vector and say you can't change positions, but I kind of feel like we still should deal with a transform, because then that iterative behavior starts to matter that much more if we're adjusting the positioning. Hey there, Lunar. Not yet, Lunar. We haven't added that yet, but that's an interesting idea. some element of automation and a core defense point. I did play a Bullet Heaven game that had a tower defense vibe, and that at the center of the map there was an alternate entity that they were trying to destroy. You could be knocked out, and some particular enemies targeted you, but for the most part they were going for the defense point. And it would be interesting if that was a moment in the progression was where you were no longer the core target, that they were instead going somewhere else. Interesting thing to think on. You looking forward to EDF 6 there, Lunar? It's going to be exciting. As I've told some folks, that is going to be at least 2 days a week, assuming they haven't pulled another Iron Rain, you know? And all the media I've seen on it implies that they haven't. So if instead, adjust position... we still would want to pass in the entity, because the positioners are spawner specific. Same with movers. They are effectively they're independent of whatever entity they're dealing with. But the idea would be that the positioners don't mess with the entity. They use it as a point of reference. So we could look at the object in relation to where the transform would have it going. To determine, do we need to translate it or not? The idea of translating it during the transformation creates other wrinkles when it comes to how the vector works. Because that includes the idea of repositioning the entity entirely, saying you're actually over here. And that works differently with the way movement would flow. Things don't just kind of appear. I think that needs to be handled by spawn point. And not by adjusting the position. Or positioners. Positioner is now rapidly turning into a bad term. But we're going to stick by it for now. I will refactor as needed. Or rename the objects as needed subsequently. Positioners originally included the spawn position. I've been told some people find the stream very relaxing, Rebelio, and we shifted the kind of music that we played to lean into that further. And yes, as far as the cats are concerned, stream time is nap time. Let's see if we can spot more of them. There were only 2 visible at the start. And now there are fewer visible. 4 of them are eating right now. Everybody but Ember is getting some food. Someday I might move a camera over there. It just gets so messy over there. A lot of that is Sky's fault. When Sky eats, what he'll do is he'll grab a mouthful of kibble. And then he will back away from the food dish, usually dropping a couple of kibbles. He will then shake the remaining kibble in his mouth, potentially losing another, and then crunch it. So it is the full capture prey and then make sure it's dead motion. Not sure what you're referring to, Rebelio. Would depend on what you're trying to get them used to. When I've introduced new cats to the area, I will often use it's like Feel Away and a couple of other variations. They're diffusers that are the kind of scent that that develops in a cat in a cat's like natural territory. The "there are cats here" smell, which can calm existing cats and new cats. They still have to adjust to the fact that they have entered somebody else's territory, but it does help everybody calm down a bit. Not really a problem for Sky. Sky gets along with everybody, but most of the others are a little cagier about new faces. So if we just do vector rotation, we need to have a method that we call on the entity and say, change your stuff. And I think that's where the transform could be useful, is that each of the positioners could say, hey, rotate this. Let's do a quick look up here. Get to this, which will let us do transform 2D. Here we go. Adjustment to the X, adjustment to the Y, and its point of origin. So this will be translation related, but nice, Rebelio. I have heard streamers refer to Godot as effectively the Blender of game development. And that's that you have a kind of a dedicated community and team devoted to creating a kind of an open, free product. With the anticipation, at least from the outside, that Godot is rapidly turning into a viable standard, potentially supplanting Unity as the indie default choice. Unreal Engine can still do some spectacular stuff, and I'm always kind of concerned when I hear somebody that says, hey, I want to make my first game, so I'm going to start with Unreal Engine. I'm going to make a simple platformer, but why? Yes, Lunar. Unity has a lot of structural problems. Their executive team seems to have some counterproductive goals. Ahead of that contract stuff, apparently there were Unity executives and developers unloading Unity stock. So you get the feeling that some folks are cashing out. Most of the game development engines, Rebelio, Unity, and Godot, have really good built-in logic for things like platformers. So, like, by default, Godot has the idea of, like, where is gravity on the screen? How much pull does it have on an entity? What kind of air resistance? What kind of surface friction? All of that kind of stuff to handle platformers and basic platformer behavior. That's like out of the box handling for some of the entities. So you can get a real jump start on that kind of thing. Hey there, Tass. Oh, the idea of like laser engravers and like cutters, especially for things um like wargaming terrain. Yeah, you have to do extra work to make it not look like it's laser cut wood, or MDF or whatever you're using. MDF if you want to really get some fumes in there, but usually like thin wood. But having a in-house tool to do that is great, but a lot of the tools for that start out real expensive. I saw an advertisement for a laser engraver that was meant to be like small boutique or personal use kind, and it looked like a sci-fi like power cell, and you kind of used it that way. There was a handle on the back, and you would set it over top of the target or press it against the target surface. Stupid expensive for a get started sort of thing, but it looked cool. Yeah, vinyl mats and markers tasks, as well as foam and a hot wire cutter, will get you a huge distance. Past that, like some grit and Mod Podge, if you want to go fancier. Yep, a hot wire on foam. If you need something angular, you use an actual like box cutter. Otherwise, you have things like what would they be? Big fuel canisters or tanks would be soda bottles, cut and potentially capped. There is so much stuff just hanging around that if you cut it, spray prime it, add little greeblies to it and then spray prime it, can look really good on a tabletop. Way better than just like a flat surface or just putting like a soda can on the board and saying, that's a pillar. You can add little bits of flair, Yeah, let's see. Is it in a functional state at the moment? So let's add our spiral there. Spiral isn't fully working yet, but you can see the random direction throws off the spiral a bit, because right now the spiral only properly functions when the default direction is straight to the right. It's just a handling problem. Then we can speed it up. Well, I'm sorry, that's a move in a random direction. That creates a weird result. We can triple it. The tripling is technically working, I think. Yeah. I don't know that this is really working how we want it to, because it is such brutal logic for it. But this tripling is where I'm sitting right now, where we need to make sure that it's adjusted properly. Because we could do random enemy and get the right result. But but we can already see some of these are a little off once you start adding them together like that. That will eventually be an option, Rabilio. There is the concept of targeting now. So right now it's targeting random direction. That is at the moment, not like end of development. The entity itself will have a targeter. So the mouse currently is set up to target a random direction, always. I'm sorry, actually, no. This movement type right here that the mouse uses is move random direction. And move random direction aims in a random direction and then moves forward. That's why if I take a second one and I attach it, you'll start to see some of the mice move much faster and some of them move much slower. And that's because two random vectors together could be at odds with each other. So we get these varied results based on the fly adjustments. And that's going to be a core mechanic of the game, or at least that's what we want to be a core mechanic of the game, is this ability to say like, hey, instead of getting a new weapon or just leveling it up, you get a new modifier. Actually, Lunar, we aren't seeking to separate that. We've actually put the two of them together on purpose. One, functionally, it is useful. And two, it creates these sort of interactions where the mouse wants to move already by default in a random direction. If I do that again, we get this really variable speed behavior. And the end power-ups, the end things in these slots are not just going to be this one moves in a random direction. It might be move in a random direction, but fire 3 at a time. So adding that one power-up could be like, oh, like I like this part and I like that part. We can already see that these positioners are, the whole logic for that is throwing some of this off. You could still do that, Lunar. So I could have a movement type. I could have an object that by default wants to move to the cursor. And so it would. But then it could have another movement type that says move in a spiral. So it would constantly be trying to apply both at once, creating its own unique behavior. There could be a package that says move in a spiral, but towards the cursor. Which, again, weird behavior. What's going to be the result? It's getting that experimentation and making it so that the exact same combinations are very hard to achieve. You use what you've got and you adapt to it accordingly. Sometimes that's going to result in you having a collection of them and putting together a combination that is terrible. And sometimes you might have the combination that floods the screen with death, you know? Hey there, Lore. Uh, I'm not sure it's coming across correctly, Lunar, but each type of movement is its own thing, and each type of targeting is its own thing. So in the definition for this arrow here is logic that says move in a straight line in whatever direction you're aiming. And then and then it's paired with a aim in a random direction. So that's, like I was saying, that's why we're getting this behavior here, is that there is actually two different movement objects, each with their own direction that they're aiming, paired with move in a straight line. So you can get one mouse that is going twice as fast as the others, and you could also get a mouse that holds perfectly still. Those are like the far ends of the spectrum there, because you could have each of these two move straight line and random direction movement types aiming in the opposite direction or the same direction. So like this one is almost aiming in opposite direction because it's crawling, whereas that one is moving like 50% faster. This is just one variation of that. We can see more of it with the spiral, because some of the spirals will start in very tight loop, and some of them will start arcing real fast or far out, like this little guy right there. Because the spiral is flawed at the moment, in that it expects to be going out to the right. It's not supposed to do that. Okay. So back to the code. I've been thinking we could apply a transform where we take Is there a zero transform? This is useful. The identity transform is a starting point, but the question is, could we say that can we get an idea of zero on a transform? Or do we have to say, is it the origin? Because if it's the origin, a transform hasn't been applied. Is this implies that we would need to use if it equals the transform, because that's how we'd reset it. Yeah, I don't think there's a Boolean operator here. That's no worries, folks. I mentioned this earlier, but a lot of this is stream of consciousness from me, so I'm gonna say what I'm thinking. It's okay if, you don't have an answer to what I'm trying to puzzle out. Part of this is that we're all kind of learning together, whether it's something that you're going to learn and apply, or you're just seeing thought processes and how they play out. Additionally, sometimes having somebody who doesn't know what's going on ask a question and having me explain it can help help everybody, or just help me realize that there is a possible solution that I hadn't considered before. Yes, yes, Lunar. To some extent, it's rubber duck development. Rubber duck development, for those of you that don't know, is a process where after writing something, you explain it as if you were explaining it to a rubber ducky, an inanimate object. Doing so requires you to articulate your thought process out loud. When you're doing that, sometimes you will realize, wait, that idea doesn't work. And hopefully, why it doesn't work. That's right. Sometimes, as you're saying, like, no, it's not supposed to work that way. What it does is this, this, this. Wait a minute, it does work that way. I don't know what the difference between rotated and rotated local is. Radium, I am using the built-in language GD script. That isn't to say that I'm not somewhat more comfortable in C#. It's that I wanted to learn a new scripting language. And hello, Epic. Hello. Welcome. So what I'm considering is changing our positioning logic. The logic that does things like fan out 3 projectiles at once. Potentially might say rotate them randomly, kind of thing. So regardless of the movement, spin them as well. One comes out in a straight line and the other 2 go in random directions accordingly. Or one comes out in a straight line and the other one goes in the opposite direction. That kind of logic. A burst of 5 spread equidistant around you. In case of the one that we've got written, it is anything from a 90-degree cone with X in it to a 360-degree circle with X in it. We can do any of those with this logic, but we're trying to figure out how to do any of those with that logic. So the thought is we make an initial change to tell it, instead of adjusting the objects directly, we create a transform, and then at the end of the process, we apply that transform to the object, and that object will take that transform and apply it to each movement object that it has in it, which would in turn adjust itself and potentially its targeters. For the most part, the targeter is an important factor, but the individual movement object might take it into account as well. And some of them won't care if you rotate them. So, for example, if a projectile was set up to face the cursor. So, hypothetically, if I had the cursor aimed somewhere and I said, hey, the mouse should always go there, then telling it to move in a spread of 3 doesn't matter, because all of them would immediately pivot to face the cursor. But if it also had another one that was move in a random direction, then it rotating that off could mean that they would appear facing in a random direction and then arc towards the cursor, because they would always want to move in that initial random direction. So you would have, again, fighting vectors, which is okay. That creates some interesting dynamics that you might have something that says, I'm going to home on whatever the nearest target is, but I'm also going to home on the cursor. You could have the nearest target over here and the cursor down here. For reference, I see that Radium found it, but there is a widescreen format stream. I know some folks find the stream more easily through the tall format as they're scrolling. But if you would like to see more of the screen at once and potentially be able to see more of the code, you can do so through the widescreen link in the short form chat. So I think this rotated is going to be the most common thing that we do. Spatial math like this, it has been so long since I've done any of that the idea of a transform matrix it's outside of my thinking. But what we can do is get a transform from the vector that it starts with. So it would have identity, and then we would need to if we never skew the translation, if we never translate it, as in we never slide it around, then rotating it on a transform doesn't matter. We would just be transforming a given vector. So if we told it this is where your vector currently is, and if a positioner says I have just started operating, this is my base vector now. Okay. Yeah. So right now when we adjust a position, we just take in an entity. But if we also took in a vector, then that would give us something that we could work with. That this is the base vector. So this is the direction that we have been given currently. So if it's nothing, we're going to try to set it. Otherwise, we're going to pass it down. And we're going to store it ourselves each time. And then we're going to remove it when we're done. We reinitialize them when we start spawning. We clear out our initial direction. So if instead of trying to derive that from the entity, we have it passed along. Beverage. So for the time being, we're going to keep the positioner chain concept as it is. What do we call you? We're going to do initial action, save vector 2. Now it doesn't like that because we have initial direction here. Well, and so we need a resultant direction based on our adjust position here. So when we adjust the position, we're going to get one back. We're going to get an adjusted vector back from one of these. And we'll then take that adjusted position and we're going to pass it in to the next entity. Because that next one in the chain will need to respect that adjusted position. So if I have a 3 spread and then a 3 spread, what you end up with is the first fan of 3, and then off of each position of that first fan of 3, we do another fan of 3. So it's possible that you would get tighter or wider angles off of the projectiles each time. Fan of 2 and fan of 2 would actually be ways to really see that in action. Fan of 3 always gives you the central one that continues in the same direction, which also tends to result in overlapping vectors when they're the same. But like fan of 3 into a fan of 2, those are always going to give you, well, can give you different results. Okay, so adjust position needs to return something now. So we adjust the position. Then, if there's the next one, we're going to pass in the adjusted position. Get rid of this initial direction thing. I don't want to mess with the entity here. But I think we need to. I think we need to do this in here. Because we don't want the spawner to mess with the position before it passes them in. When we're cloning it for subsequent passes, then we would just be copying all of the internal contents. So yeah, I don't want that here. So when it calls adjust position initial direction, it will be whatever the entity has is the initial direction. And then an individual positioner will interpret that accordingly. And say, what do I have? So I'm trying to sort this out. I kind of want them not to mess with the entity's target movement. That can create oddities as far as how that's flowing. Instead, I want to have the idea of a vector that we want to assert. Okay, this is where the transform comes in, because I don't want it to be... We could just set the target movement to the new value, but that won't help. Okay, yeah, needs to be a transform. So we get a transform coming in. That transform by default is going to be a neutral transform. It will have no adjustments to it. And then we're going to get an adjusted transform from adjust position. And we're going to keep passing that in. Because the subsequent ones will look at the entity, potentially get that entity's facing, apply that transform to it locally, and say, this is the actual direction we're facing. I can make adjustments to it. But in the case of like a 3 spread, it doesn't care which direction the entity is facing, because all it's going to do is rotate it. Yeah. Yeah. I like that. We could also collapse this when we adjust position. We could essentially return done adjusting to it. But we never ask if we're done adjusting here. Oh, no, we ask the parent if it's done adjusting when we loop back around. Yeah. Terminology problem. We'll fix that later. Hello, one. Welcome to the broadcast. Are you joining us for the first time? I don't recognize the name. which could just be a problem with my memory, as is common. Ah, okay. By default, it returns transform identity, which is do nothing. I'm sorry, no. It returns the transform that it got. Don't think we need get new anymore either. Because we just clone it. Oh. Well, I hope she had a good birthday. Okay. Let's adjust position. Well, you can always catch up with the VODs if you're not present and you're interested in what happened. Most likely, barring unforeseen circumstances, Friday and probably the weekend we'll be playing the new EDF game. Theme parks can be fun. Yeah. So then if we apply the translation or the transformation, okay, we pass it in and we update it each time. So if there's another one, we're going to adjust it accordingly. And then at the end, we return adjusted transform. And at the end of a positioner chain after we have spawned, we're going to apply that transform to the entity. We're going to hand it that transform. And the entity itself will apply that most likely to its targeters. Each of the movements in it, but it's going to pass them along to each movement object that it contains, and that object will most likely just pass it to its targeter, but it might also apply it itself. So if a movement type has a, whatever direction I'm given first, I will always obey that direction. It could do that, but I don't really want movers to do that. Like, if they have their own direction, if they have a targeter, they should respect the targeter. Like, a spiral that homes is going to do weird stuff. An orbit that homes is going to do weird stuff. Because it won't have the target entity will be different, like how it tries to move towards it, kind of thing. Hello, Sherbet. Sherbet has joined me behind my head. Okay, so we've got that. Now we're going to go into our... Don't think we need these get news anymore. Is there something in that theme park in particular you're looking forward to, one? Not a fan of most theme parks myself. Not on some sort of, like, fundamental level, but... Okay, we need to change these signatures. Sherbet has a really quiet trill that he does. His brother has a really quiet meow. They're not real vocal. Sky, Sammy, and Ember are pretty vocal in their own ways. Sammy has the traditional meow. That. Actually, no. Positioner. We're not changing adjust position. Hello. Sherbet has realized he can walk across my lap, both for a from transit perspective, but also in a, hey, I can get all kinds of attention if I do this. He kind of melts if he gets back scratches. Yeah, previously he wouldn't want to cross my lap or anything like that. So he would start. He started by using the back of my chair as a transit route from a table to a shelf. But what I would do is I'd reach up and scratch his back or stroke his back as he was passing, and then he started to hop up there and just kind of hang out and get back scratches. And now he has started walking down my shoulder, and when he gets back scratches, he just lays down. So, at this point now, the only cat that will not sit on my lap is Mason. And Mason has some idiosyncrasies, one of which is he will sit in my lap and do the little make biscuits pawing thing for a moment. Like, he'll just stand there, and then he will try to walk up onto my shoulder and lay like 3/4 from his chest down on that shoulder. And he wants to be held just so while that's happening. He doesn't want to be cradled, he doesn't want to be fully held up, but he kind of wants to stand his hind legs there and get sort of hugged. Otherwise, what he wants is back scratches proceeding along to him flopping over on his back and getting belly scratches. He is my only cat that likes belly scratches right now. He has the sturdy body frame where they have a kind of a firmer, muscular belly instead of the sort of belly flap. So when you're scratching his belly, you're scratching the belly and not essentially poking his organs. Mouse here so that I might continue working. He is not satisfied with this. We go into pattern spread. We change the signature. We're going to reload the project because we need to update all of the definitions. Don't know what's going on with game here, but should be fine. There you go. It says, okay, I'm done. It says, but first let me rub my face all over your keyboard here. Someday he will be comfy enough to at least let me trim a couple of murder mittens at a time. At the moment, he's prone to, when he flexes his paws, does his little happy, kneading the dough kind of behavior there. He will sink a claw fully into some fabric, and he has to disentangle himself after. Hello, Adrian. Hello. So this is where I don't want to mess with that. Instead, we're going to take the transform and we're going to rotate it accordingly. It's coming along there, Adrian. It's coming along. Is past our first hour, so I'm going to step away for just a moment, take my hourly break, get up and move around a bit, and I will be right back. And we're back. To locate a couple of the kitties. And hello there, Alex. So we could just return that. And then at the end, when we spawn it, that's no worries, Alex. Our schedule's been a bit disrupted lately anyway. So we're still going to keep we still need to keep this pattern here. The identity. So this is if we have positioners, we're going to start with a no translation at all. Or no transformation. So whatever the entity has. We don't need an initial direction. So we don't need a target direction here. Same way when we initialize, we don't need a target direction. Because our target direction is entirely right here. So when we spawn it, if we create this entity, then we're going to say new entity move. Wait, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1. 1/millionth of a second. In theory, that will mean that we get the smallest possible movement, but it should be some degree of movement. Still feels so redundant because we always have a positioner chain. No, actually we don't. We don't always have a positioner chain because we might have no actual positioners. And if we have a chain, we don't reset this until we're done. We could restructure this to be cleaner, but ultimately. So don't pass in an initial direction. Make that a little bigger for folks there. So after we call adjust position, and we update the entity, so as soon as we spawn it, we set that. Because we are going to clear it later anyway if we need to. But as soon as we've spawned it, we set entity to copy. We clone it because we have stored off, we have given it a direction. We only did that later because positioner chain moved it if it needed to. But we don't want to mess with that. The clone is how it was when it spawned and initially moved. We should do that in the spawn function, though. Just gonna do that. So we create a clone. We create a clone of it at that moment. Classy. Buttons pressed. Okay, so we do that, we adjust the position. And we will say spawned entity I'm gonna say by transform. We'll okay, so we are getting a transform to apply. And now we're going to pass that to the entity and say, do your thing with this transform. So now we go into the entity. I don't really want iframes to be a thing here, but This isn't really iframes in the sense of I can't be hurt. This is iframes in the sense that do not collide with me currently. So once a collision happens, it won't check again for some amount of time once we have done something with the collision. That way, if an object collides with another and it actually handles that collision, we aren't necessarily going to continue and have every other object collide again, or to have like another damage tick as soon as another physics frame comes around, that kind of thing. But anyway. Spelling, I can do it. So then as a movement, in movements, so this is where we actually do it. So then we go back into our spawner and we say spawned entity, apply transform. So we do this immediately after, because we have adjusted its position. And then in the spawned entity, we're going to go through, and for each of the movements, we're going to pass in that transform. So now we go into movement. So in each subsequent one, they would call the super on it, so that we will do this where we pass into the targeter for that. So then in targeter, we do nothing intrinsically. Actually, okay. So, in this direction. Times. Is that operator? So transform times vector 2 equals a vector 2. Yeah. Hey there, Sachiko. Welcome to the broadcast. We are coding our game right now. Let's do a kitty check since somebody has joined us here. And we haven't done one in a while. Let's see if any of the others have shown themselves. I think I startled Sammy when I was looking for Mason, so Mason has shown himself. I suspect Sherbet and Sammy are under the bed. Unclear where Sky is. We'll check on him again in a bit. Oh, well, there's Sky. He has come to visit Mason. Sky will sometimes try to drive them out of that spot. Okay, so then we apply it to each targeter as well. Each movement can also apply it accordingly. Okay. So we're going to reload the project just to be sure. Then we're probably going to make an interim save as well. Or commit. In game, we have a parse errors somewhere. Ah. We're calling spawn for the player. Well. Player factory, actually. Just need the position. Okay. Oh. When we move an entity... So the problem is that the player factory is trying to spawn the player, which results in us calling move on the player. Move on an entity will intrinsically check and see if they're out of range of the player. So we need to have a safety check in here. Further we are from the player, 1 gives them maximum priority by default. 0 would give them minimum priority. So, if player factory if we have a player in the player factory, we are going to do this calculation for the agent's movement. Otherwise, we'll ignore it. Will this still work? Entity. We still need to check if there is a player. Yeah. And there is a player there. So we're going to do an end check first. We're going to check this first, because if we've got an and this is false, it's not. In most languages, it won't do this check. Direction. Okay, we're not getting a transform applied, but we're still adding 3. Okay. Okay, we're getting there. We're getting there. Our ID. That's weird. Let's frames. If there's a player, we're updating the priority. There is no agent RID yet. Because we haven't initialized it yet. Oh. We can't actually move it. This is when we actually move the thing. This isn't great. Okay, so now we're going to go into our spread pattern. So 2D is equal to transform rotated. We don't need to have this secondary object allocated, but we're doing it so we can see it real quickly. Okay. So we have transform and adjusted transform. So we now have a rotation to set. Oh. It's because we're not actually transforming any, or we're not actually rotating anything. So we're going to close everything else. I am actually going to make an interim save real quick here. Preliminary commit here. Okay. We have our pattern spread. We need targeter now. So by default, it has an apply transform. Where we set the direction equal to the transform direction. Okay. This is happening later, though. No, it should be happening during the first move. Why is target random direction showing up at all here? Oh, okay. Here. Hey, we're never applying the transform to targeter. No? Yeah. Okay. So in movement. Huh. Targeter. Apply, transform, transform. Let's reload. Still not happening. Okay, so we are rotating it that much. So adjusted transform is different than the transform coming in. Step through. We return the adjusted transform. Now we apply the transform to it. Actually apply the transform. I went through and created all these shells and then didn't use them. Oh, that'll cause a problem. If you don't do the thing won't happen. Transform. Look at that. Look at that. Okay. And again. And again. And again. Okay, so spiral motion still gets some weird results because of the flaw in spiral. I think we have S-curve on this one. Yeah. Okay, so positioning is fixed. Positioning has been changed so that instead of birds and things, instead of directly manipulating the vector of the entity as it when it spawned, instead we apply a transform to it. So when we're creating these spread patterns in similar, we're just going through and saying you're going to rotate it this much. Each of those positioners then handles the adjustment in a vacuum. So if a positioner says rotate it 45 degrees, it's going to apply that 45-degree rotation to whatever it got, so whatever prior transform it got. So let's change in our catalog. Go into the code. We are going to load positioners. So we have our 90-degree spread. We're going to change it to a 80-degree spread with 2 bullets. Spreading out like that. Then again. Still not quite right. Because the two spreads are causing an overlap. So if I do like a 90-degree spread, it'll be 45 degrees between each of them. It'll be that middle, you know? Do I do this so it won't line up properly? Oh, we would need to do two. We would need to do two. So I would have 3 and 90 here. We're going to temporarily add another one that is... So we're going to add one of each of those in the game here for a moment. This will be 2 and 80. That's the triple. And then that'll be a double on the triple. So you can see 3 distinct sets there as they fan out. There we go. There we go. Excellent. Okay, that's working. Let's look at spiral again. So a spiral would need... Right now we have an outward force to its movement. It'll have a target or two. So I think this is the trick here. This is targeter. The target direction. Say vector 2. And then if dot direction, then target direction is equal to the targeter direction. Else direction is equal to vector right. Okay, this should give us an interesting result, if nothing else. There we go. Okay, so we have changed spiral to respect the incoming targeter direction. Now, ideally, spiral won't have a random target direction, because that gets a weird result here. But more like, we will have an entity that does not have an intrinsic move random direction. This is where we would use the yarn instead. But we'll get to that. I want to have the burst positioner next. So to get a burst in there, we need that 1, 2, 3. Well, hello there, Get. Welcome. Welcome to the broadcast. You are joining us for our game dev stream. The cat on camera is Ember. Let's see if we can spot any of the others here. Okay, we've got 3 visible at the moment. We have Ember up there on the across from my keyboard, top center for you. And then left we have Sky and Mason on the bed. Sky is the fluffy gray and white one. And below him, the tan and white one is Mason. I have 5 cats in total. 5 cats in total, Get. Not visible are Sammy, a little black and white tuxedo, and Sherbet, another tan and white. Okay, so Spiral is doing what we want it to do currently. We need to do the burst now. There's numerous cats. I found 5 is about the limit for me, as far as being able to give them all adequate attention. The day has been going pretty well. We're making some progress. So when we ask a positioner if it's delaying, we're going to ask, should it delay? With a delta value. Create a new script, and it's going to be first. And it inherits positioner. Just so. Okay, so right now, as far as positioners, we only have the spread. This can cover anything from cones to circles with any number of them. We can change, instead of 3, let's do 20 at a time. In 180. Hey there, Starry Night. Welcome. Good to see you again. It's not quite right. It should be 20 segments at a time in a 180, but that's not right. Been doing well. I'm making a Bullet Heaven style game. So this is like kind of like Vampire Survivors kind of stuff. But the weapon system is meant to be akin to Noita, where you can swap little cards on the weapon around and change its behavior. Start angle is determined when we initialize. No. There's part of our problem. So we have the template being applied. So we're never actually going in and adjusting what start angle is and what spread angle is. Oh, no, wait, here we go. I should scroll down. Akin to that, Get. The goal is to make it so that each of the little glyphs that you put in will create compelling behavior. Whether that's like, move in a straight line towards the nearest target and then explode. Or move in a spiral 3 at a time. Stuff like that. So there's always a decision of, if I add this, it will change the behavior in this way and allow me to hit, ideally, more targets more often. Okay, this isn't right. Why is it spread arc times 2? I really like the genre there. Get the there's a lot of potential in it as far as uh, what you can do with it, and for a while it was kind of the hot thing to make. That has died off pretty hard, but I still think there's a lot of potential if you can find a way to recapture that feeling. I think part of the feeling that folks miss is the feeling of getting out of control, where everything that you pick should have a point where if you keep making good choices, uh, that it gets super strong super fast. But you want to minimize the number of negative choices that you might be presented with. In this case, you might be making choices that make it hard to use, but every choice you make is meant to make it more powerful. I mean, as far as I mean, like dying off, I don't mean like vampire survivors and similar. I mean the tendency for development shops to try to recreate the new hotness, you know, that everybody has to make their own vampire survivors. Now we're getting people that are dedicated to making a good new one as opposed to just let's fire one out as quick as we can. Yeah, we'll see how long League manages to maintain interest in that one. But yeah, I'm hoping that as far as those, that we get more quality in them. People that are actually looking at it and saying, how can we make it so that when you're making decisions, it's cool stuff? Haven't played it because, you know, it's League and there's a level of, you know, surface contact poison that comes with that company. Uh, but from what I have seen of their little bullet heaven style one, to some extent, it's much. It has the same vibe. Yeah, it has the same vibe. But seeing their little arena game, their little two-person team arena, having a similar vibe, and then their new one of kind of, you know, again, kind of bullet heaven. I feel like they've got the right idea. You know, they seem to be actually trying to capture the spirit. It's closer. Oh man. Yeah, you'd have a very competitive, well, adversarial in that kind of game would definitely be tricky. Uh, at that point, At that point, I feel like you're drifting closer to the pattern of bullet hells than you are bullet heavens. You would have probably the same mechanic of offense with bullet heaven in that you're producing them, but the core gameplay would end up being more in line with a bullet hell. So your classic dodge all of the bullets kind of gameplay would be more of what you're doing, which is interesting. You'd certainly need to make the arena the right size to handle it. Otherwise, the strategy would generally be tackle them. So that you get that, proximity collision damage. We have 3 bullets in the spread. Looks about right. Yeah. Okay, let's try it back with 3. Yeah. So then if I get myself 3 of those. Yeah. I feel like this is off just a little bit, though. So we finish our adjustment, we increase the bullet count by 1. Otherwise, it's the starting. I think it's correct. Okay. Okay. So now we want that burst. Yes, they're little wind-up mice there, Get. Go into game. And do both. Then we can do the yarn ball. Yarn ball, I think, doesn't have a targeter properly connected. is move spiral should have has random direction as well. Yeah, the yarn ball isn't respecting it. In fact, the yarn ball isn't coming out into random direction. Let's isolate. Lots of debugging code here. We are spawning 3 at once, but we're not fanning them. Go in, we create it, we clone it, we initialize it. That's when we actually spawn it. Okay. So we get our initial transform that has rotation to it. Then we apply this transform. Apply the transform, and our current direction has a null on it. How does a target random direction not have a get direction on it? Move spiral is never... How is move spiral never... Where's target random direction? Move spiral is not consulting it. Pretty sure we made it consult it. Okay. Do vector right if targeter get direction. direction, target direction is equal to vector 2 right. Okay, so when the spiral forms, it's going to, at the moment, the spiral uses a random direction. Which is necessary if we want it to have a spread. Because the targeter needs to have its direction rotated. Which means it needs to get called. Well, that's not right. Let's do a cat check. Why you go into orbit? Is effectively a 1. Target direction is consistent. Okay, this is why. I didn't address the other one. There we go. It took us a while to get back here, but we're back here. Yes is holding. Let's do a double spiral. We're getting weird results because double spiral is being subjected to the same thing, is there's sometimes that the two spirals push against each other. Let's make it weirder. Spiral with an S-curve. Spiral with an S-curve with random directions. So the spiral doesn't need random directions is the thing. So we are going to have we got a lot of errors here. Are we not getting agents for the movement? Debug. That's the player. This entity is a what? It is a yarn ball. How does it not have an agent? Okay, so we should get a player's movement first, and then there's the player entity. And now we are in, okay, there's the player's initialize. Now this should be a yarn ball entity. So there's no agent here. This is the yarn ball's initialize. We now have a resource identifier. We set its map, avoidance, and mask. So again, oh, but when we clone it, are we doing that? We apply the template. Okay, so in spawner, we actually spawn it. We move it, we create the copy. This copy has an agent. Initialize it, we set the entity. Okay, we're going to let them fire one at a time. No errors yet. Now we're going to add 3 at a time. D9 at a time, D7 at a time. Okay, now we're reusing them. As soon as we're reusing the entities, our agents are not being updated. So let's go into our positioner pool. Sorry, our entity pool. That's why we're cloning it. We pop the front, we set its template values. So we've cloned the template. That makes sense. We haven't added it to the array. We haven't added it anywhere else. We've cloned that template. So this is about when we should start having problems. Okay. Need to go into... We need to run the game without it. Now we are going to trigger this quickly. So once this number hits over 100, that's when the issue will start happening. Here. So we pop the front. We now have an entity. It's got an agent RID. This is where. That is an invalid agent that it's got. We initialize it here. This is where we're running into the conflict, is we're moving it before we get a new agent. We could apply the template later. That doesn't make sense, actually. Oh, no, it doesn't matter. We just need to get it from the pool. If we move it, that's when we're going to have the problem. This is where we have the issue, is we just got it from the pool. As soon as we move it, we've created the problem. entity to copy. Then that. Okay, if we have an entity to copy, then we're going to use that template as the copy. We are going to keep all of its information. If we don't have an entity to copy it, otherwise we create a new one. If we didn't have an entity to copy, then we are going to adjust our current the new entity that we created, and then we're going to create the copy. Seven at a time. It's not until they start getting destroyed, so we have to wait a little bit. But, okay, so things have started getting destroyed, and problem should begin. Fixed it. Okay. There's still a bunch of raggedy edges in the logic here. But we got that. We've got that. Let's dress it a little bit more. Add a fourth one to give us like 100 at a time. $81. This is a whole bunch at once. They're overlapping each other. Here, we can make that look better. So in our load positioners, instead of it being 3 and 90, we're going to have it be... we're going to be 50 over a 180. Uh, 30. Nice little even number here, which means we cannot stack these. There we go. There we go. All right, let's make it weird. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. How about weirder still? Yeah, yeah. Okay, one more time. Oh, that's a neat result. Okay, so normally if you double stack spirals, you can get them like frozen in place. But the thing that's fixing that is move random direction here. Because that ensures that we're always applying a fixed vector to it, which is forcing them to move even if the spirals are counter to each other. So that one that's moving really slow is still getting pushed outward. Oh, yeah. So we still have to deal with our bullet count limits here. We don't want over... At about 2,000 entities on screen, we start having problems. So let's get some blobs in there right about at the end of the stream. So, oh no, not 10. That'll cause problems. I'm gonna set it to have a 1,000 enemy limit. Okay, so we have our randomly angled spiral here. Now let's ramp up the number of projectiles that are coming out here. Okay. Let's up the number of blobs we are producing here. And a second. Now they'll come swarming in pretty fast here. But if we ramp up the number of projectiles wildly, we're going to start to see them get culled pretty steadily, but every blob takes 2 projectiles to wipe out. So it takes a little bit. This is about to slow things way down. Watch this. There are so many yarn balls coming out of that right now. It's about 900 yarn balls that are being generated at once in that loop. Yeah, about 900. So it wipes the world clean. Oh, let's do weird stuff. Here we go. I think we're getting enough of a hitch when it launches. We're losing 3 frames a second at a 30 frames a second cap when all of those objects leap into existence. And it's enough that we're actually having some of the entities right on us survive. I do want... We want the blobs to stop without being right on top of the player. So that we don't have some of the collision anomalies. Instance square width divided by 4. if you are curious, the initial battery of items are all going to be cat themed. Still getting right on top of the player. Oh. Times. Um, 16. What we're trying to do here is we want to make sure that the blobs stop a little bit out from the player. We still want the contact to happen. We still want them to make sprite contact with the player, but we don't want them sitting right on the player. There we go. There we go. We're using distance squared because it's a cheaper calculation. There's no square root being done in that calculation. Since with a distance squared calculation, you're doing a right triangle. Isn't like the hypotenuse, the long side. Yeah, by making it so that they can't stand right on top, you avoid the period when the projectile is just spawned. Oh, that's neat. Adding the extra random direction to the spiral creates that sort of in and then back out. Very nice. We would not have a power-up set like this. There would not be a 30 spread. So this is the spiral with a random direction attached. If we put the S-curve on it this way, without the random direction here. So this is with an S-curve attached to the spiral. It kind of pulses outward in an increasing size, but still, kind of a in, like, then out again, then in a little bit, then out again. If we add random direction to that, the next wave should start crossing over itself a bit. Based on how severe that random direction is compared to the last. See how it eventually curves back in at some point in the process. We're getting some interesting results now. Okay, how about this curve with another spiral? There tends to be one little outlier guy if things lurch a bit. Okay, so this is spiral and then S-curve. And they can dodge some hits. Boy, we can get some weird results with double spiral. Let's just do 30 at a time. Let's lower the number of blobs. We are 100%, and let's just mess around at the end. We accomplished something stage. So here's one at a time, with a spiral with a random starting vector, or starting angle. Now here's a double spiral now. So we're starting to get some that stay close, some that speed up in a wider angle. Differences. So we'll take that off. Here's regular spiral again. Here's a spiral with a additional random direction movement in it. So we start to get spirals that will... Technically what's happening is that the spiral is being dragged in a particular direction. We don't know what that direction is, but it's being dragged that way. Okay. So now we're going to add the S-curve into it. So they're going to kind of make a S pattern along the direction of the spiral, which makes it look like they're kind of wildly flying around, but they do have a course that they're taking. So now we're going to add the random direct. Let's clean it out for a bit here. Let's let them reset till we don't see too many of them on screen anymore. What I may add is a fixed direction marker that is vector right, so that the spiral always comes out in a known direction. So now we're going to do random right and then S-curve. Or random and then S-curve. So now it is the spiral, which has a random starting angle, like it will be pointing in a random direction and come out more or less right and down, rotated in that direction for the initial spiral. Then applies a force that is in a different random direction at about 1 square per second in that direction. Then it applies this curve movement to it. So now we let that go out. Let all these S-curvy ones get out of there. So we're back to a spiral. Now we're going to S-curve and then move random direction. See how we're having different results because the S-curves pattern is being applied and then we're shoving it. Some of these will be very similar results, but the ones that rely on which direction they're moving, the resultant vector that they're getting, that matters. Because the S-curve adjusts where it's going up and down based on the vector that it is currently moving at. So when we S-curve before we shove it, the S-curve is in the path of the spiral. We can make that clearer if instead of the yarn we use the mouse. So the mouse moves in straight lines at the moment. Long term, the mouse won't move in straight lines. It will arc towards targets. So nice straight lines. If we add the S-curve to it now, it's going to move up and down along those straight lines. So you can, if you watch an individual mouse, it's going to go back and forth, but you can kind of see what its straight line is. So now we're going to change that straight line. Now, the mouse will go faster or slower as far as in a direction, but the S-curve is going to still follow that. So this one is that one was moving laterally. So you can see this one, the close one, is going down and right, but it's doing it very slowly because the vectors are opposed to each other. But it's still moving up and down at the same pace along that path. So now we're going to do the up and down motion first and then apply the other vector. So you can see with this one, the motion left is much stronger than the motion right. So we tend to get exaggerated angles because the S-curve is being determined by the first random direction. The second random direction gets applied after. In a similar fashion, let's get random direction going again. Nice, steady velocity, random direction. About 1 square a second. The squares are here for debugging purposes. So now we're going to add a spiral. So the spiral starts its behavior in a random facing. So it's being influenced accordingly. You can see some of the mice hard pivot shortly after moving. So now we're going to do a double random. So some of the mice are going to come out really slow, and then they're going to hard pivot and start building speed, because the spiral increases in speed as it goes. Its angle of rotation is constant, but the distance from its starting point, when it's calculating the next point to move to, increases as it gets further from its center of origin. So now let's do it after. Pull that out, we'll clean it off. The mice survive about 10 seconds before they go away, so. Okay, we're pretty much cleared out. Now we'll do spiral and then random. So it's random, spiral, random. So some of them come flying out pretty quick. But that is the intent of the system. This is the simplest form of it. Here. We'll do 3 at a time. Oh. 3 at 90. So here's 3 at a time. So if we add the yarn ball in here, the cone of 3 gives us a really good idea of where any individual cluster is going, because you can see the shape of it. Let's make it 9 so you can really... It looks like 5. There's 9 of them. So now we're going to add that extra direction in here. So some of them will come out fast, some will come out really slow, like that. Yeah, 10 seconds, this little imperceptible, hardly moving set will go away. So now we add that spiral in there. Now we add the other random, where some of them are coming out much slower and some of them will come out faster. And then the spiral is applied. Then we put the spiral beforehand. So we're applying a random vector, then the spiral vector, then the random vector again. This setup isn't as drastic. We still get the spiral being dragged along, but it's pretty consistent whether it's random before or random after. But the S-curve is influenced very heavily by where it shows up. So an S-curve before a spiral is doing its S-curve based on the random direction. So at that point, we have a S-curve in a random direction being dragged along a spiral. Whereas this is a spiral being dragged in a random direction that has an S-curve along that resultant vector. So you get really different results based on how many. Well, you get really different results here based on both which adjustments you have and in what sequence you put them. So just by making a little adjustment, the flow of the projectiles can be very, very different. Good times, though. Check a couple of things here. Yeah, I think that's where we're going to wrap up for the day. Okay, so what we accomplished today is that we've got movement and positioning back under control. Now we're looping back to adding some more base types of movement in position. I had started to create one that was burst. Positioning has an option. So positioning controls how you spawn. Let's actually switch back over. So positioning is the thing that says they move in they appear in this cone. So 3 of them in a spread. Whereas movement is how they flow. This is the straight line. Targeting is which direction or potentially which object do they move towards, kind of stuff. Positioning, though, because of the way it's saying move 3 at a time, what this does is it also allows us to have a delay. So these 3 are spawning all at once. That's why if we spawn a bunch at a time, it can take the system a moment because it's doing all of those simultaneously. I might go in and make it so that the ticks can happen faster so that we can spawn more of them in quick succession. But I don't want there to be a perceptible difference in where they are. They should look like they all spawned almost simultaneously. Usually. We may change that. But positioners also have the ability to delay. So the mice are spawning once a second, but we could say every half second it spawns one of the mice. So that then, instead of doing each cluster of 3, it could say 1, 2, 3 in kind of a left, middle, right kind of pattern. So what we want to do is get that burst in there, because burst is one that the sequence of positioners matters. Only speak English, so we get one translation to determine how people are behaving. Just pushing a couple buttons here real quick. Well, I'm gonna say war. I'm not sure how that's fully pronounced. I appreciate the compliment, and we generally go for somber, relaxed music. It emphasizes the chill atmosphere. We keep things laid back. Oh, but yeah. So next, we want the positioner that does burst fire, because if you do... So right now I only have 3 at a time. So you can't really see much of a difference when I do 3 on 3, because you have 2 cones that overlap each other. So the middle, how it looks like 5, the second and the fourth one are actually 2 at once. This is just some nice somber piano music. But if we have some other positioners, then especially some that make delays, that's when it's going to matter. That's when it's really going to matter. Because then if I put the 3 before or after the burst, then we will either get, like, say it's a 3 burst. I would have 3 sets of 3 in succession. So, here, here, here. Each facing the same direction, but still just being the same cone. But if it is the 3, but then a burst, what I would get is 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. It would be more of a... It's hard to describe, but we will see that. We will see that next time. If I remember. We'll find out tomorrow. We'll find out tomorrow. But we did make progress. So we have positioners in a functional and, I think, more sustainable pattern right now. Our movements were adjusted to a better pattern before that. I still think positioners have some code cleanup we can do, but it's good for now. It's good for now. Yeah, so we're going to spread into delay-based positioners. We're going to move into that next. And maybe some additional movements. I wouldn't mind getting the direct orbiting movement and see how that goes. And some targeters that are aimed at the player and the enemy, so that we can get some of that movement logic in. And we'll see. But I want to thank everybody for watching today. I hope you had a good time. Always fun to talk through the programming to anybody that's watching. It helps me think through it, and I hope it's a at least interesting experience for you as well. Like I mentioned, we are going to be coding again tomorrow. Starting Friday, we're going to be playing at least 2 days of EDF6 a week until either I am tired of it or we have discovered that they broke it again, like with Iron Rain. I don't think they will based on that, but I really loved the EDF series, so we'll see more of that. I may change up the music that I use. Maybe we won't use the piano, but I will not be playing music from games, even in the game that we're playing anymore, because I am tired of dealing with uh, content ID shenanigans. So heads up on that is any game we play will be one of these soundtracks that I have access to. But I want to thank you all again for watching with us today. If you like what you saw and would like to see more, remember to like, follow, and subscribe. But in the interim, have a good rest of your day, and goodbye.